Warm greetings from the High 10. It is Everyday Shenanigans on this Monday, June 1st, 2020. Happy June to some of you. But it really isn't a happy June, is it? With the unrest that is going on in our country right now from the death of George Floyd, there is no rest for the weary, and it never has been. A troubled time we are in. And I would like to say to some of you, I had mentioned to you about the other day when I made a video, I believe it was Saturday, about the abolishment of slavery was in 1868. Well, it was 1865. I said 68 because in my mind I had remember reading somewhere where slaves were free. It was written on paper that they were free, but their slave owners didn't tell them that they were free. So some were still in bondage when actually they were supposed to be let free. So I'm going to bring you said information to verify the information of slavery and tying it into the injustices of being a black person and the things we have had to overcome being so-called Americans in this country, and relating it to brutality and mayhem and mischief that has been exacted upon my people for hundreds of years. And thanks for joining me. This information is brought to you by The Root. And please stay tuned to their information because The Root puts out a lot of informative information pertaining to African American culture and history. When were blacks truly freed from slavery? Though President Abraham Lincoln ended slavery with the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, slaves in Texas had no knowledge of their freedom until 2.5 years later. On June 19, 1865, Union soldiers arrived in Galveston and declared the end of the Civil War, with General Granger reading aloud a special decree that ordered the freeing of some 200,000 slaves in the state. It's a lot of people. Because of the delay, many African Americans started a tradition of celebrating the actual day slavery ended on June 19th, also known as Juneteenth. But for some, their cheers were short-lived, thanks to the South's lucrative prison labor system and a deceptive practice called debt peonage. A kind of neo-slavery continued for some blacks long into the 1940s. The question then arises, when did African Americans really claim their freedom? Chattel slavery, in the classic sense, ended with the Civil War's close and Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation. Reconstruction followed, creating new opportunities for African Americans who owned and profited from their own land and dug into the local politics. It's important not to skip over the first part of True Freedom, says Douglas Blackman, author of Slavery by Another Name, the re-enslavement of black Americans from the Civil War to World War II, and co-executive producer of the eponymous documentary film. Public education as we know it today and the first property rights for women were instituted by African American elected officials, but the social achievements were fleeting. Put yourself in that place, Blackman said. You're enslaved, then liberated for 30 years, and then all of a sudden, a certain group of people begin a campaign to force you back into slavery. Across the South, laws were instituted that stripped African Americans of their rights, making celebrations like Juneteenth a distant memory. A prison labor paradigm developed. Jail owners profited from the hard labor of their black inmates who were incarcerated for petty crimes like vagrancy, which carried long sentences. Prisons sold their workforce to nearby industrial companies to work as coal miners, for example, for as much as $9 a month, and inmates were often worked to death. Elsewhere, whites fabricated debt owed by blacks, forcing them into peonage and trading years of free work for their freedom, a practice that spread across the Bible Belt. Take note of that. Peonage. Debt. That wasn't really a debt. But in 1941, President Franklin D. Roosevelt moved against that notion, following the bombing of Pearl Harbor during World War II by Japanese troops. Roosevelt signed Circular Number 3591, giving teeth to the anti-peonage law of 1867, which criminalized the practice. Dispatching a federal investigation, Roosevelt's team prosecuted guilty whites and effectively ended peonage in 1942. However, African American second-class citizenship has reappeared as a result of the war on drugs and draconian laws created during the 1980s. As civil rights litigator and author Michelle Alexander points out in her recent book, The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration of the Age of Color Blindness, the subjugation of African Americans through criminalization continues through the prison industrial complex. Racial caste is alive and well in America, Alexander wrote in the Huffington Post. Here are a few facts. There are more African Americans under correctional control today in prison or jail, on probation or parole, than were enslaved in 1850, a decade before the Civil War began. As of 2004, more African American men were disenfranchised due to felon disenfranchisement laws than in 1870, the year the 15th Amendment was ratified, prohibiting laws that explicitly deny the right to vote on the basis of race. But Blackman explains that the American economy doesn't rely on prison labor for major financial gain the way the New South did. For that reason, he is hopeful that the prison industrial complex won't evolve into a form of modern-day slavery. As the crime rates have dramatically dropped in the last decade, people have begun to feel less threatened, Blackman offers. Now they can open their eyes and say, why are these young men who really didn't do much of anything in jail? And this is the said information by The Root. I brought you this article because I had always heard this saying, free ain't really free. And as you see, for some of you African Americans, non-white, white, do not know, had not heard, that African American people pay the debt even after being set free. And when I mean set free, I mean physically set free. But some people, as you see in the state of Texas, they were free, but their slave owner didn't let them go. And this peonage law, which was put into act in 1867, went on into 1900s, 1942, when Mr. Roosevelt said, no more. So you see, the white man has always done what he wanted to do. You decided to steal people from their land. I was just reading back here where Portuguese people stole slaves in the 1400s. Now that's a damn long time ago. Before slaves actually made it to this land called America. Yeah, the Queen is schooling you today. And I'm learning as I go along. When I said 1868, I had to remember it was 1865 that it was on paper. But history takes us back that this went on 1865, January. Lincoln says free the slaves, but it wasn't actually ratified until December of 1865. So you're talking about almost a whole year of still being enslaved when Lincoln had passed. Wrote into a bill, free the slaves. Do you see what I'm saying? And then we find out it was actually passed in the House in 1864. You see how the years keep going back, a year back, a year back, a year back. And then you fast forward, 1865, you were to be freed. But some slave owners did not free the African American people. And how will we know if you can't read or write? You don't have access to information, the newspaper, a leaflet to tell you otherwise, that you are free. And then when you finally got let go by your slave owner, they decided to tell you, well, you owe us a debt. And that was revenge because Lincoln set us free. Oh, I'm not going to comply with the rules. What the white European has always done was be combative and defy the law. You say to yourself, why are you talking about this, Angela? Why not? I say this to you, lily white, self-entitled, self-absorbed sons of bitches that want to talk about the people looting and rioting and stealing whiskey out the stores, and they're only stealing out the stores. They're only going and breaking into the liquor stores. Check yourself, because you see, you don't know your homework. You don't know what the hell you're talking about. The looting and the graffiti and the vandalism is the ramifications for death, injustices enacted upon the American people, the Black American people. The death of George Floyd. Don't you get it? It's not about breaking into the stores, the graffiti, the looting, setting things on fire, setting buildings, police cars on fire. It is a reaction, such as your forefathers did when we were set free and you did not comply with the law, white people, and you decided to say, okay, black man, black woman, you're still going to work for me and pay me, although you have been set free by the President of the United States, Mr. Lincoln. Do you see what I'm saying? So all this BS I'm hearing on social media sites and newsbreak apps where people are giving their commentary, because I'm a frequent commenter on the newsbreak app. Some of you white people hiding behind your cell phones and computers talking all that junk about looting and all they care about is liquor. You sound like a damn fool. Because you see, as I said, the looting is a reaction. Why don't you talk about what they did to George Floyd? Why don't you talk about what the police did to Chauvin, what Chauvin did to George Floyd, Why don't you focus on that? Stop focusing on the graffiti and the rioting and the looting. That's a reaction. Chauvin murdered that man in cold blood in view of a camera rolling that went across the world, and he did not care. And his cohorts, fellow police officers, did not care. And not even one jumped in to stop him. Not even one. And when the man pleaded for his life, Chauvin continued to lay that knee in his neck, and the others rode the ride along with him. And I hated that no one could jump in, but I knew the ramifications of that. They probably would have ended up as George Floyd. You people love commenting on pages, Twitter, Snapchat, Facebook, newsbreak apps, social media, commenting on news pages with your sap-ass comments about black people. They. Well, let me tell you something, white man, white woman. We are a product of your they. You are us, and we are you. Because you see, you brought us here. You brought our ancestors here, and you enslaved us. And even when we were free, you still kept us in bondage with a peonage law and debt. And you did not abide by the law. You did what you wanted to do. And in 1942, the law was enacted for us, my ancestors, not to owe you a damn dime, because we never owed you nothing. How could we owe you when we didn't ask to be here? You enslaved us, you paid us no money, and even when we were actually physically set free, you stole our land. You would not allow us to barter, to do business, to own property, set afire our property, churches, stole our land, and now have the nerve to sit up and say, look at them looting. Look at them stealing. How dare you? You are the cause of this problem. And you may not be, as you think, guilty. That was a long time ago. That was my mama, my grandmama, my great-granddaddy, my great-great-great. It doesn't matter. You still have the mindset of a slave master and the racist white people who lived amongst us, who ran over us, used us, raped us, stole from us. So when I think of a debt, I say you owe us, and you do owe us. You owe us heavily, and let me tell you, you can never repay the debt for slavery, and you can never repay the debt of separating families, beatings, hangings, stealing our land, telling us where we can go and live and shop, incarcerating us for long periods of time for petty crimes. You can never repay the debt. You need to own the fact that your ancestors, and some of you still today, are racist and you are ignorant and you are insecure with yourselves, and you have been taught that the black race is a problem. But you see, you brought this problem here, and it has exacerbated from being oppressed, from being downtrodden. You did this. Your people, your kind, they did this to us. And you need to own that fact. George Floyd was a human being, an African-American human being, an American who was viciously murdered in front of people. And he was murdered by the police, the Minneapolis Police Department. And you all sit behind your stinking phones and computers, spewing more venom, hiding like a coward, knowing full well what that white man did to that black man was vile and inhumane. So don't talk to me about looting and whiskey and stealing out of liquor stores, and that's all they care about, is stealing TVs and this and that. You have the nerve. It ain't about the looting. We sat idly by in the 50s and 60s. We protested, we marched quietly, peacefully, without enacting any type of violence, and your ancestors hosed us down, put the dogs on us, beat us, hung us, set us on fire, set buses on fire with the Freedom Riders, young people, black and white, trying to exact some type of peace for African-American people. Burned that bus in Mississippi, if I'm not mistaken. So don't talk to me about looting. You've been looting from day one. You've been stealing from day one. You stole this land. It does not belong to you. It was never yours. You didn't work. Your ancestors never worked. They didn't do a damn thing to acquire the wealth that they have. So don't talk to me about looting and thievery and liquor stores and TVs. Your ancestors stole this land, stole the people to work the land, pushed out the Indian people, and they're still paying the price to this day, the Indian people. And the American government has tried to soothe them over with a little this and a little that and a little compensation. You can't repay the Indian people a damn thing because they were here first. Amen. The ramifications going on today in the streets because of the death of George Floyd should not be a shock to anyone walking, anyone sane. We as African-American people and some white, non-whites are tired and fed up of the injustices enacted upon us African-American people. We are fed up. We are tired. We're tired of being profiled. We're tired of being mistreated. We're tired of being manhandled, chokehold, beat up. And that stinking Oriental cop that stood by trying to block that young girl from filming George Floyd's death. Maybe you should look up the fact that he beat a man up so severely and knocked his teeth out. And he has an open case as I speak with the Minneapolis Police Department. And 6 strikes against him on his police record, not counting the 18 strikes against Chauvin's record. So don't talk to me about theft, looting. Your kind has been stealing. They, them, those have been stealing, been thievery, been fraudulent. The moment your kind set foot on what you now call America, American soil, you can't repay the debt you owe us. You will never be able to repay us a damn dime. So get off your lazy ass crying behind a phone about looting and own the fact that your race has been unkind and inhumane to the African American people and the Indian people as well. And some of you are still racist for no damn reason because you are insecure with yourself. You are miserable with yourself. Nobody's done a damn thing to you. No one. Your kind robs White people steal every damn day. Fraudulently, white-collar crimes. Your pill heads, meth heads, heroin addicts. You abuse your kids. You are no different than anybody else. You steal people's money, Ponzi schemes. So I beg to differ when you talk about they. You are us, and we are you, because we are all human. You are no different, and you are no better. George Floyd died on a pavement in the streets of Minneapolis by the Minneapolis police. And we are seeking justice for his death. And whatever comes along is nothing compared to the death of that man and so many other African Americans who have been murdered by the police department. Breonna Taylor. Did you forget about her? Did you forget about her? You are no different. And guess what? Nobody cares about your opinions. The only people who care about your stinking ass opinions are the people who are like you, who secretly hide and moan and seethe and grit their teeth, crying and moaning about they, them, those, them kind. You are those kind. You are just as wicked. Your kind is just as wicked. And anybody that rallies behind a police killing a black man in a public street for no reason, rallies behind people spewing venom, white supremacy, you are no different than the people looting in the stores, graffiti on the wall, burning trash cans and police cars. You are no different. Because I know you would go out there and do the same. You would do the same. Because you are the same. Everyday Shenanigans. Thanks for joining me. God bless America. Justice for George Floyd. Amen.